All right, it seems that we are reaching the time to start. If we are ready, Tanisha, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Mars. How are you doing?
Very excited. I can't wait to start this conversation that it is out there. Everybody's talking about it, but right now we're going to spell the words and give a lot of great information that we all know it's important, but we haven't heard that much about it. What about you?
I'm excited too. I am, to be fair, I'm a little anxious, a little bit nervous, but I'm happy that I am co-hosting with you because we share similar experiences, and it's often good to have company to encourage you. So this is good, and we also I'm happy that we have a great team from HR Prime behind us and supporting us with this particular topic and this particular issue. So yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I have grabbed a coffee myself, so let's enjoy this. Thank you very much, everyone. We have a good number of attendees. Just very quickly, there is a button there to raise your hand in the controls. You will also find a place where you can chat. There is a lot of content, so our preference will be to save questions. We will be responding most of the questions at the end. It's something very quick that we can comment along the way, we will. Otherwise, we will have a moment at the end for questions and answers. So let's start with introducing who we are. Who are we?
Well, I guess I'll jump in right here. So my name is my name is Tanisha Benjamin, and I'm Senior HR Research and Content Developer at HR Prime. I've been with the organization for a little over 8 months, and outside of HR Prime, I have worked in organization change and leadership development with a range of institutions, whether it be local, regional, or international. And I've also done a lot of work in diversity, inclusion, and engagement. That's just a little bit about me. Mars?
I am Maurice, and I am a senior consultant. I have been working for HR, operations, analytics, and mostly systems for over 10 years. But at the same time, I have been working a lot in topics related to diversity. I am a meditation teacher. I have a couple of certifications as well as yoga. So I have been working a lot with related issues to mental health, most of them with alternative options that have been proved to be very powerful. I have also been an executive director of the Ontario Pride Network. So I helped the public service to protect and to learn and to educate about topics related to diversity. I am a certified positive space champion, and I am myself, I am a minority. I have an accent, if you can tell. This is not, this is not part of the show, it's real. And we are, the truth is that we are in Canada, we are in Ontario, in Toronto, we are in a diverse environment. And right now, going through a lot of different changes. We are going through a lot of different experiences. So let's start with it. All right, just a really quick ask. There is a store credit that you will receive 75 of the purchase of any HR Prime product. There you go.
Okay, so I'll take a lead from here. So just to reiterate from what we had on the screen before, that the content in this webinar does not consider legal advice, but we hope to provide enough information that is informative and that you can be used as a tool to address some of the issues regarding race and racism within your organization. You can go ahead and continue with more points there for me, Morris.
I'm okay. I think we're ready to start with the content.
Okay, so just to give an outline of what we'll be discussing today, we have a number of items, but we have 4 in particular. The first one will be dimensions of racism and how they reveal themselves in the workplace. The second one that we'll be looking at is the impact of racism on racialized employees and the company on a whole. And to be completely transparent, we acknowledge that the topic of discrimination is broad and complex and requires much more than one webinar. And for this reason, we will be principally focusing on racial discrimination. And oftentimes we'll make specific reference to the Black community. And the choice to focus on the Black community today is not intended to undervalue the experience and or issues of other racialized groups. But given the current climate, given Black Lives Matter, we wish to tool employers with resources support their Black employees. And to do this, we'll be speaking to common missteps often taken by employers when addressing racism. And we'll be looking at strategic approaches to eliminate racism and achieve change. And of course, we'll be examining or looking at some of the tools, for example, legislations that employers have at their disposal, and best practices that they can also engage in. The objective here is to challenge the colorblind ideology of racism. And I know it's an uncomfortable topic and for many persons to talk about race, but the issue here is that we can't eliminate racism without acknowledge race. Next slide, please. All right, so let's dive right into it. Racism versus racial discrimination. So racism is a broader experience than racial discrimination. Racism is the belief that one group is superior to another, and is more deeply rooted in attitudes, values, and stereotypical beliefs. So in essence, racial discrimination is the illegal expression of racism. So racial discrimination is any action, intentional or not, that has the effect of singling out persons based on their race and imposing burdens on them and not on others. And under this broad umbrella of racial discrimination, we have 4 categories, and these include institutional racism, structural racism, and we have interpersonal racism and internalized racism, or as many persons have come to refer to it as unconscious bias. Let's look at institutional racism. Institutional racism are policies and practices that reinforce racist standards within a workplace or an organization. And these practices could take the form of discriminatory hiring processes or practices, and I'll be speaking to that in our next slide. Structural racism are institutions that collectively uphold racist policies and practices. But in the workplace, what are these institutions? Many persons tend to ask these questions. These institutions in the workplace could represent actors. Could you go back for a moment, please?
Sorry, I think I clicked too fast.
That's okay. So yes, these institutions in the workplace could be actors. And who are these actors? These actors could be your human resource professional, it could be the employer, it could be the managers and the supervisors. So in essence, while they are carrying out their responsibilities, they intentionally or not can practice or implement policies that may have discriminatory effects on our racialized groups. Both institutional racism and structural racism has been coined together to be now referred to as systemic racism. And then we have interpersonal racism, which is interactions between 2 or more people and can manifest itself in biases, prejudices, and microaggressions. So oftentimes you'll see this in the workplace as employers or employees or co-workers making racial slurs or jokes. And oftentimes you'll see it as hate crimes as well. And internalized racism or unconscious bias, these are implicit attitudes and stereotypes, motivations and assumptions, which can occur without one's knowledge or intention. So they're deeply rooted in attitudes, values, and stereotypical beliefs. And I firmly believe that with internalized racism, one needs to examine the source of those beliefs. So for example, if your knowledge of a particular racialized group is solely based on what you see in the media, specifically as it relates to movies, songs, videos, you may want to move beyond those sources and expand and do research to have a more complete and holistic experience and idea of what these individuals are and what their experience is. Next slide, please. So racism in the workplace. How do racism manifest itself in the workplace? So in the workplace, racism manifests itself in discriminatory hiring processes, as I said before. And these could be through recruitment, retention, promotion, and appointments. A 2003 Northwestern studies found that employers are more likely to consider white candidates with criminal records than Black candidates with no such history. Discriminatory hiring processes are systematic racism. It's built-in practices. It also could look at, it could also amount to microaggressive activities as being assigned less desirable projects for racialized groups. It could be being denied training and mentorship that advocate, that advance them in the organization. And these racialized groups tend to receive less promotional opportunities as well. And then we have harassment that often is, showcased in the workplace. And as I said before, you could see this in racial jokes, graffiti images, slurs, and hate crimes. Less than a week ago, we also found that in Toronto, on the construction site, there was a symbol, which is a noose, that was found in on the construction site. And this is, in a sense, being right now investigated as a hate crime. The wage gap also is another idea, another example of how racism is manifested within the workplace. So racialized minorities, particularly Blacks and Aboriginal members, tend to be concentrated in lower paying occupations with poor working conditions in comparison to their white counterparts. Next slide, please. So racism has many impacts on individuals within our organization. So we have it affecting our racialized group, and it also have an impact on the company itself. For example, racism affects the health and safety of racialized individuals. It is a chronic stress caused by discrimination and can contribute to mental and physical problems. Workers subject to racial discrimination would have an increased risk at work-related illnesses, injuries, or assault resulting from increased stress exposure. We also see where racism and discrimination on a whole have contributed towards decline in morale. People feeling disconnected and powerless, second-guessing themselves and worrying and decreasing, they have decreased hope. And also we see where it can also affect their performance and their productivity negatively. You need to understand also that for a racialized group, if they believe and feel that they have, no matter how hard they work and no matter how much they have garnered in terms of education and to be qualified for a particular position, and no matter with all of these aside, they will still not get a position solely on the base of the color of their skin. This can contribute towards feeling powerless and declining morale. So how does this affect the company? There will be systematic distrust, and this looks like loss of confidence and trust and respect in those persons in authority and the company policies and systems. So you do not trust when they say, for example, there will be equal opportunity as it relates to being promoted for a particular position, because you do not have that confidence and trust within the systems. Also, you have high turnover rate. Persons from racialized group will not stay with the company if they continue to work diligently and work hard, but not get what is due to them solely because of the color of their skin or ancestry and so forth. And this affects the bottom line for a company. Customers, you lose customers, there will be clients boycotting it because you have a reputation for engaging in discriminatory practices. And also you limit yourself as a company, as you no longer have access to this immense talent pool of diverse and well-skilled and educated individuals. Next slide, please. So some common missteps when dealing with racism in the workplace by employers. We often find that employers, because they are uncomfortable or because they're naive to the situation, they tend to keep silent. This can work in your favor sometimes, but sometimes it cannot. And lately we have been seeing that it has not been working in a lot of employers. Well, it's not been working to their advantage, because sometimes not communicating shows lack of support, lack of empathy, and lack of sympathy. Becoming overly defensive. So leaders must resist such reaction because they do not allow for constructive engagement. Comment on systemic inequities or inequalities are not personal attacks. And so it's advised that you move away from being defensive, but creating a safe environment for constructive discussions. Overly generalizing. Though individuals, it's important to understand that even within racialized group, for example, Black community, their individuals are still different, and it's important that you not generalize experiences. And also we look at implicit bias workshop and training. So programming targeted towards all employees will sometimes not be successful. Sometimes you need to speak to the issue at hand. So if, for example, as the case may be right now, there's a lot of issues surrounding Black Lives Matter. You may want to have a professional come in if you're not an expert in that area, to come in and address those issues specifically, and speak to those persons from their experience and their so to speak their lifestyle. Source of information. It's important not to put the onus on your racialized groups to inform you about their struggles. This is oftentimes their experience is very chronic and it is a trauma. And in having someone, an employer, ask them to relive that trauma is not a healthy experience. So we encourage employers to go and read. There's a lot of resources out there, from books, videos, and authoritative sources, that is, to inform you about different experiences of the racialized groups within your organization. And finally here, don't be disingenuous. It's important that you not only chant Black Lives Matter, but you make sure within your organization that there's representation at the leadership level for these racialized groups. Next slide, please. So you've seen what not to do. So there are tools available to you as an employer to help you address racism in the workplace. And one of those tools are legislations. And we have legislations from the federal level and also from the provincial level. And from the federal level, we have the Canadian Human Rights Act that protects employees from discrimination and harassment when based on one or more grounds of discrimination, and this includes race. We also have the Employment Equity Act. And this Employment Equity Act, the purpose of it is to ensure no one is denied employment for a reason not related to ability. So it aims to facilitate fairness for visible minorities, and this includes racialized groups. But also, what is important for you to understand that there are some limitations to these acts, and it's important that you know this as an employer, and to figure out ways in which you can eliminate these and move beyond what these acts provide, which is, for example, the Employment Equity Act. It's only applies to federal government and public services. So it's not widely applied. So for the private sector, to support your racialized group, it will be good to show that, you are taking on this responsibility by, narrowing the gap for wage within your organization. And then the provisional level, we have the Ontario Human Rights Code. And this provides equal opportunity and freedom from discrimination. Each individual has a right to be free from racial discrimination and harassment. And this legislation is also supported by the Ontario Health and Safety Act and Regulation that facilitates a strong internal responsibility system. And what that means is that there's a responsibility on each member of the organization to eliminate discrimination within the organization. So that means there's responsibility on the worker, the employer, supervisors, and managers to, when they see discriminatory activities, to report it, address it as effectively and efficiently as possible. And we encourage the employers to consult their human rights, resource managers and their health and safety inspectors and public health officials to determine what is reasonable in cases of discriminatory activities and practices. Next slide, please. And when we look at, oftentimes we look at employers, their obligation as it relates to discipline within the workplace. And oftentimes, this is the primary focus, but it's important to understand that you as an employer do have a duty to address off-duty conduct. And this was specific, this was related in the case of the Merit and Tiger Cat industry case where improper conduct of an employee while not at work may form grounds for termination with cause, but in very limited circumstances. And these circumstances could be, for example, if it harms a company's reputation. Oftentimes you see persons make tweets and then you hear about a situation where they have been dismissed. And also we look at it leads other employers to refuse or be reluctant or unable to work with a person who have engaged in discriminatory practices. It's very difficult for you to have your racialized employees work in a culture that is toxic, where another individual is constantly, whether at work or outside of work, engaged in discriminatory practices. That filters over into the workplace and can create conflict and a tense work environment. It also renders the employee unable to, another limited circumstances is in which it renders the employee unable to satisfactorily perform his or her duties. So for example, because of these out of work conduct, your clients may not want to work with them because they engage in discriminatory practices. And of course, it amounts to serious breach of criminal code that is injurious to the general reputation of the company and its employees, or it makes it difficult for the employees to efficiently and effectively manage the workforce. Over to you, Morris.
Okay, do you want to talk about this last one on dealing about racism?
So these are some, considerations for when dealing with racism outside of legislation. It's important to acknowledge, to act, and to affirm. So as it relates to tests for entry point hiring practices, instead of allowing for human pre-screening activities, you can eliminate some of these activities by, in terms of how you word your application. Oftentimes you see wording within your ads as in strong English background. This communicates, that persons who have accents or who have a second language who may not be as strong may not qualify for these positions. Also, programs. In terms of hiring practices, also it's important to have standardized questions. When you have standardized questions, it provides a very transparent and very level playing field for those persons, those applicants who are applying for jobs. Programs. Develop anti-racism education programs and anti-oppressive training to help leaders and staff understand systemic and unconscious racism. And evaluation. Conduct annual reporting on how racialized employees are represented in the workplace. Show steps taken to achieve full representation. So in essence, do not just say that you will be, you have diversity in the workplace. You need to show statistics that show that you have been growing with your diversity for promoting persons from racialized group to more leadership positions. So we look at experts. In terms of experts, we wanted, for example, if you have persons coming to the organization to talk about the issues concerning racialized group, ensure these experts have a background in the experience of these racialized groups. They will be better able to identify with their trauma and their experiences and provide the support, the necessary support they need to move on or to cope with their experiences. And we also talk about representation. We talk about representation at the higher level. When you have more representation in leadership, you're better able to provide policies and practices that better support minority groups. Objectivity. Ensure that those policies that you have in place are consistent. They don't just support one group and not support the other. Ensure that they're given feedback also, is an objective process. Show empathy. You may not necessarily understand the experience of your racialized employees, but empathy goes a long way. And reporting. Create a space where employees feel comfortable to report incidences of racism without fear of retaliation. Ensure incidences are objectively investigated. And this is a big issue, particularly for those persons who are employers who are actually the person carrying out those racist behavior. It's important that that is addressed and there's system in place that allow employees also understand that they can report these instances without feeling that they will be retaliated at work. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Tanisha. This is great, and I can jump in from here. So far, what we have done, and I haven't seen anything like this before. We have gotten a lot of information that is needed to understand the background of racism and diversity. But now from here, once we know all that, how does that look in the workplace when we are managing people and when we are in operations? The first thing when I consult with clients and when I've gone through these situations to explore and understand, the first thing that I always recommend is to start building metrics. You cannot act, you cannot work if you do not understand. There are different ways where you can learn what is happening in an organization. First of all, as it was mentioned by Tanisha, to acknowledge, even before jumping to metrics and numbers, just to acknowledge that there are bias. We all have bias, we all have unconscious bias, and that means that we fill in the gaps with our cultural background, our experience. One example that is very common is having a team, for example, of 15 people. 14 people might be having a great time, but one person might not having that or the best time. Sometimes we don't know, sometimes we don't notice it, and sometimes the organization assumes that everything is great. But that is because metrics, at the same time that give us great information, that can also potentially be biased. A metric will give us the information that represents a majority, if we use a survey, for example. But what about that minority? So it's very important to be aware of that minority piece of information. Now, knowing that, there is two different methodologies that I recommend. There is this organization that is called the CCDI, and I have worked with them when I worked at OLG, and they are great. Basically, they help you out to design and implement questions that will be valuable, that you can send out as a survey to your employees. Then you capture that information, and you will be able to work with it. That will be step number one, to understand what is going on. What type of information can you get from there? Well, you can get information related to equity. You can get equity. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in the next slide. We can get information related to the workforce representation. Okay, here, there are different sources where we can find a workforce representation. Oftentimes, organizations use the information that you gather from ATS, from applicant tracking systems, where people self-disclose some of the information based on diversity. Even though HR manager, that is confidential, HR managers usually and most not have access to see who respond what, but you can get a stats of that. I have compared that data with data sent out later on the employee during the employee life cycle on a survey, and it is not the same. Somehow the response when someone is hired might be, I don't know, there might be some pressure to respond one thing on another, thinking that people might take a decision based on that. So I would recommend to use a survey inside the organization when you ask voluntarily people to voluntarily share that information, and you assure them that it's confidential and that is not, there's no way to know who responds what. Feelings of inclusion, that touches a little bit when we are getting into engagement. Inclusion and engagement go hand by hand, but inclusion talks about the general feeling of the organization. I mean, engagement talks about the general feeling of the organization, while inclusion, it also talks about the minority, about that person, about that individual that might be different for many different reasons. It could be because it's from a different cultural background, it has a different way of belief. It's just maybe in a team, there is a team of extroverts and one person is introvert. So we have to make sure that we capture that too. And any additional comments? There is another organization that created the Crescendo method. This is more mathematical. It works. I have not worked that much in that. I still recommend it if you want to be more precise, like if you want to predict more with stats, regressions, and that kind of higher level numbers. You can find ranked methods, initiative-focused methodologies, demographics, company-wide, correlational metrics, and outside of the company metrics, that is benchmark and see how other organizations might be doing. All right, so now that we started the conversation about inclusion, I have here a big infographic. Let's focus on the centerpiece. That centerpiece, as in the title I say, diversity without inclusion is not enough. And I am separating inclusion from diversity because I think it requires a separate conversation. To have inclusion, what does inclusion mean? Inclusion is something that you promote. It's a behavior that you promote within the workplace and with your employees. And it starts with these 6 signature traits that you must be able to implement and to work with people, to have an employee program where everyone is using these type of traits. First of all, in the little icon with the light bulb, curiosity. It is important to show curiosity about your people. That creates inclusion. How is your day? How is your family? Remember a few things important about that person. Oh, I know you like chocolates. I brought chocolates. Cultural intelligence. Just appreciate that different cultures might see things different, but there is a level of intelligence and be open to it. Collaboration. Invite people. Every piece of collaboration is important. Today, we might be working on something very technical, and one member of the team might not be very technical. Get involved. Make sure that it's part of it, because tomorrow we might have a task that is not that requires a different set of skills. It might require some writing of policy. That person might be great at it. So it is a way to get people involved. When people collaborate, they feel more part of the organization. They mean part of a team, and it also helps with stress and mental health. Make a commitment. Every time that you talk about it, just commit to it and do it. Be sure that people in the organization feel that they are backed up, that you are holding their back. Be there for your people. And courage. Talking about imperfection involves taking personal risk. So it's okay. Learn how to have those difficult conversations, have courage, and talk about the things that need to be talked about. And cognizance. That is to know basically at a higher level bias, that we are biased, and trying to know that we can go beyond bias. There is not much we can do about those unconscious bias because they're unconscious, but just by knowing that they exist, we can be more aware when that happens. In the left side, I made a little bit of cartoon. I took a little cartoon that it's very popular about the difference between equality, equity, and justice. If you can see, equality and equity and justice is not the same. When we talk about equality, we try to make a workplace that is the same for everyone. Unfortunately, that might not be great for some people. Then we can get to the next level and find equity. That means giving people aid, helping that person for the lack of being the same as other people, give them a tool to be able to enjoy or to do the work the same way than others. But then it's a higher level justice, when you completely eliminate the barrier. That is a progressive plan that we can work. And the only way to know is by talking to those people in the minority space. The inclusion model, and this is a model from that I've seen from Deloitte when they work with clients to implement employee programs. We have fairness and respect, valued and belonging, safe and open. We need to be empowered and growing. And behavior towards inclusion, as I said in that model of curiosity, cultural intelligence, collaboration, commitment, courage, and cognizance, that is to promote these behaviors towards inclusion, opposed, unaware, undecided, anxious, undecided, fatigue, supported, commitment. You are trying to move the organization to a place where people understand the difference and that they can overcome those ones. In the other corner, opposite side, the diversity and inclusion. What are we talking about when we talk about inclusion? We have to know that there are different aspects of it. This is not just one thing. We have to know that there are groups and differences. I have here 5 of the big ones. One is gender in the workplace. Women, men are the 2 binary ones, but we need to be aware that more than only the binary ones, there is more than that. People identify with different genders now. Cultural of genius, just the cultural background. When I come to my workplace, I bring a Mexican person because that's where I'm from, right? And I bring a lot of good jokes. I'm very open, I'm very extroverted, but also I see things different, and sometimes I might feel not included because I might be the only one. So when people know and recognize that, that is one of the important things. Belonging. Make sure that people feel that they belong. People with disabilities, we tend to think that disabilities are visual. Not all of them are visual. You need to be aware that some of them are not. And mental health is important. We have to be able to read the signs. Like if someone at work is looking different one day, or it's having a bad time for a week or 2, don't jump into the conclusion that that person it is not performing well and it requires discipline. For the first thing that a manager or a people in the workplace that should do is start by coaching. And then at the end, once you understand all these maps that we put together about inclusion, it is now time to jump into diversity. Now you have the tools to understand that people are different, and then you can manage diversity and build employee programs. Engagement. All right. I say go electronic. This is a big thing. There is a lot of to be implemented. There are a lot of great tools, and it starts from the number one, even before the employee is engaged with the organization. You can start with engaging by using an applicant tracking system, and then by onboarding people electronically. Move away from paper, and then you can try to make sure that people are engaged using the technology. And why to manage engagement? You want to have an optimistic, team-oriented, go beyond, above and beyond, solution-oriented, selfless, show passion. Passion is very important, and pass credit and accept blame. And how to manage engagement? Use the right employee engagement survey, as I said, metrics. The information is the first thing that you need. Focus on engagement at the local and organization level. Select the right manager, not the expert, not the people that know the works necessarily is a good people manager. But being a manager is a skill, so that can be developed. Great organization has great training for managers. Oftentimes, a people-centered manager, a person that understands people and that is with the people, will get things done better than the expert. And that is because people on the roles, they are experts of what they do. And sometimes they just need good coaching. They need someone that can put the things together as a puzzle. Coach managers hold them accountable of their employee engagement. I always suggest and I recommend to make it part of a performance review, part of the objectives of every manager on an organization to be accountable, not only for the performance and productivity, but engagement. I will use surveys to see which teams are not engaged, because at the end of the day, if people go from your organization, they go with an experience, and that is marketing how the organization looks outside the workplace. And coach managers hold them accountable for the employees' engagement. If we don't do that, we are trying to move from the blue piece and within the green to try to avoid the red one, to not be pessimistic, which is the opposite of the blue one. High absenteeism, negative attitudes, egocentric experience. How many times have you seen people that are great at their job? They're amazing at what they do, but they are egocentric and they put down people. They are condescending, and well, that doesn't work very well at the end. You can get someone that gets the work done, but if you at the end of the day you have high turnover, well, that person is productive or is it not? That's what I will have asked myself as an HR manager. Focus on monetary worth. I will say when you engage people, you can help the organization to move the feeling of someone being engaged or being in the organization for the monetary worth to the passion. By engaging them, you learn what they like to do and how they want to do it, and then you can implement employee programs. And accept credit, but passes along with blame. That happens, and unfortunately, that people try to get credit from other people, but they passes along the blame, right? That is not right. I have some definitions, very quick. I'm going through the definitions. Quantum workplace, Gallup, engage. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go in detail for all of them. But just to know that you can research and really quickly see that there are a lot of different definitions. Diversity mix. In that diversity mix, we have all these areas: family status, gender, education, military service, thinking of personality, style, language, race, ethnicity, where the office is, the location, sexual orientation, is it an LGBT or ally, disability, age, generation, lifestyle, and background and experience. All these things are important considerations about the diversity mix, and we need to understand that not because one person has the same background has the same experience. For instance, not every Black employee has the same experience. People might be immigrants and might be at risk of losing the work permit. This is something that is happening today, actually. My partner works at a travel agency organization that brings people from Australia and England, and some of them have lost their jobs because they are not from here, or visa offices. So that is something to take in consideration when we talk about diversity. There are multiple family formats. We have to understand that there is not only mother, dad, and children. So when we refer, as Tanisha said, about a family, I've heard one time an employee saying just in good faith, "Oh, that guy is so nice. I wish my daughter married someone like him." And I had to interject and said, that guy is gay. He might not like to be engaged with in that way with a woman. So be careful on what you say and how you say it. People might present themselves at work in a similar way because of the corporate standards, but when they are not at work, they are unique and they are different. And this is just a big part. Just understand and acknowledge that when people come to work, yes, they try to bring themselves, 100% of themselves, but there is more than that. It's not just that. So this is all for me on my participation for this portion. Please feel free to send questions along. We will try the best to respond all those questions. I have some questions right now that we can start addressing. Our friend is asking, how does an organization differentiate discrimination on various levels, race, religion, and abilities or disabilities? Do you have any comment about that, Tanisha, or do you want me to jump in it?
You can jump in, and I'll add if you may speak. Go ahead.
Okay, so there are a couple of different ways to talk about this point. First, we know when someone is discriminating, once a person files a report. The law doesn't deal in a very different way broadly. The law protects all the there are protected grounds on diversity, and all of them are protected. But for disability, there are other portions that are a little bit of code. People with disability, for example, if a person goes out, there's another set of ways to deal with disabilities. If someone is missing work, you cannot in Ontario, in Toronto, ask for a doctor note. You cannot fire someone who comes back from work after a long leave. So you have to be careful with those ones. If someone is on leave, you need to know that there might be a disability, and you need to be sure that it's protected. The same thing about religion. As we said, there are two types of discrimination. There's systemic and non-systemic. Like systemic one can be on something biased. As soon as we realize that something is going on, and if we have a request by an employee that feels, let's see what we can, as long as it is reasonable. For example, if we have an extra room and we can have all faith room for everyone who wants to meditate, to pray, or whatever they need to do to engage in their belief and their faith, if it is reasonable and we can do it, I will say we should do it. On to you.
Okay, so I'll just like to add just a little bit to what you just said. In terms of how the workplace itself differentiates discrimination on various levels, I've seen I will give you some examples that may not be obvious to some employers. For example, as it relates to religion, oftentimes you see the more dominant religion within the organization, for example, Christianity. Employers who are part of that faith, they are given holidays to go and celebrate or practice these religious activities. But for those other groups that do not subscribe to this particular religion, unfortunately, at times they are not afforded similar opportunities. So that's one way it's differentiated within the organization, and the onus is on the employer to recognize that and put in measures to allow equal opportunities for all persons of all diverse religion to be able to celebrate and practice their religious activities. And of course, as it relates to abilities, you know, one of the recommendations will say, or disabilities, one of the recommendations will say, when you hire persons with disability, instead of if you have stairs, you know, you can implement ramps for them to enter the company much easier. You know, these are things that you can consider as solutions. Yeah, and that's my 2 cents on that one. So we have a question here from Latoya Burnham, and she's it's regards to, should management include employees, particularly those from racialized or minority groups, in their planning sessions for tackling racism in the workplace, or is this considered insensitive? I would say management should offer the opportunity to minority groups. There will be some persons who, from racialized group, who will not want to participate in it. Do not force them to. It should be something that they're comfortable in doing. In planning these sessions, there's persons like myself and like Morris will be, you know, quick and, you know, excited to participate, to help to facilitate the process. These, of course, is always welcome, but we also encourage employers to be mindful that persons may not want to take on that responsibility. And they also have the possibility of you know, consulting experts to inform these sessions that are racially based or racially based or biased. Do you have anything to say on that, Morris?
I will say that if you don't have minority or a group representation entirely in the workplace, you are missing out. And if you don't have that either in one of your committees, you are also missing out. Can you force them? As Tanisha said, no, you cannot. But the truth is that everybody is really passionate about who they are. And it depends on how you manage that and how you open that invitation for people to join. I have been part of a lot of committees, and during my long time at the government, I've always created new groups, new committees, and new employee resource groups. If you show those traits that I was talking about in the presentation, show curiosity. If you send out an email inviting people to be part of a committee, or if you want, just tell that you want to know about them, and everybody wants to share who they are. Definitely, yes, in almost of the groups that I have worked with in diversity committees, and as I said, as part of I was an executive of the entire Pride Network, definitely bringing someone on board and inviting someone on board with a cultural perspective and a different perspective, it will always enrich. There is only one way that the unconscious bias can be uncovered, and that is through the information, the appropriate information. When you interact, and we have people in the meeting, in the committee from other areas, those discussions that can come and other perspectives, that could be the aha moment than the people that don't see can see. So definitely, I will invite them. We have another question. In favor of inclusion in planning, where should an employee start? As an employee, sorry, do you want to start with this one, or can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay, so there are two levels of an employee. There's individual contributors, and there is people managers. Individual contributors, where can you start? Just talk to your manager. Just say what you are passionate about. I have people reporting to me that one of my employees was very shy about mental health issues that was experiencing, and at some point when we offer understanding, and I actually wanted to know, I didn't want to know the specifics, I just wanted to know as an individual how I can help. So I created an environment of a reverse mentor. You told me, this person felt so encouraged that at the end started feeling motivated and created a group within the organization, a committee for mental health. And the group was really well received in the organization, very quickly. They have members, and a lot of events and educational sessions and training sessions started happening from there. So just talk and show the passion, and just be open with organization. If you find a person, if you don't find, if you are not comfortable with the manager or the person that you are reporting to, find in the organization HR, look for HR, human resources. They will be able to help you. Oftentimes there might be HR will know of a leader that is already working on that kind of stuff. I would say don't start jumping and taking actions on yourself. Have the organization been involved, whether from your manager or an employee. Now, on the other side, as a people manager, where do I start? Number one, where I will say to start with information. You can't start acting without knowing. And I've seen this happening. I see a bunch of leaders, most of them are white male leaders, making decisions about what is good from diversity. Those programs might look good, that will be a good marketing, but membership might not be that high and not be very well received. So know what is happening. One way to know, as I said, is through metrics. Invest the time and effort to have surveys, and from those surveys have an analyst, an HR analyst or a consultant, to see and uncover the information and convert that into an employee program. Training. There's a lot of training available. Most of what I know, I was trained in the government to become a positive space champion. Invest on training on the people. There's a lot of great, amazing training that has to do with it. That's my 2 cents on this one. Any comments from you, Tanisha?
No, I think you covered that thoroughly. Thank you.
All right. Any other question before we go? It's 11:55. We went a little bit above the time that we were thinking to. We have 1 more minute for a question or two. Otherwise, if we don't, we can go ahead and just say thank you to everyone. We have here a bunch of great information in the last slide. While you read that and take the time, just introduce to you, if you don't know, all our amazing team. We have a team of very highly skilled professionals in HR from different backgrounds, from different areas. We are truly a diverse group, very knowledgeable, and we are always happy to help. The best thing you can do is find a consultant, talk to us. Our leader, Darcy or Neil, they will be very happy to get you onboarded if you have questions on how to work with us. We are all here to help. I don't see any other question coming. Do you have any last comment, Tanisha?
Just to say thank you to everyone for registering. We do know this is a very heavy topic. And it requires much more than one webinar, as I stated in our first, within our introduction. So we thank you. We do know it's a lot of information to consume in one sitting. So we are available. So you can always reach out to our team. And also wanted to, thank our team for providing this space for myself and Mars to discuss this issue that we're so passionate about and that informs our lives as well. So thank you for the support from everybody. And yeah, that's my 2 cents today.
It was a great experience working on this with you, Tanisha. We both share the passion. I really hope this is just the beginning of doing a lot of amazing work. What I see in the future is both of us working for a client, an organization where we can implement all these amazing methodologies and strategies, and of course, including systems and metrics and all that fun stuff. Thank you very much, Tanisha. I really loved all the information provided by presenting with you myself. I learned a lot about it, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Same.
Thank you very much, everyone. We hope you have a great time. See you next time in the next webinar.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.